Once, in a quiet village, nestled between rivers and hills, lived a young man named Viraj. He was known for his fierce ambition and desire to be respected. Viraj had grown up seeing the power and prestige of wealthy merchants and village leaders, and he often told himself, "One day, I'll rise above everyone." Though Viraj was clever, he had a flaw. He was impatient. He believed that decisions had to be made swiftly, not always thoughtfully, and once made, never questioned. To regret is to be weak, he thought. His father, an old farmer, often tried to advise him, "Son, decisions are like seeds. Some grow into good harvests, and others yield nothing but weeds. You must learn to see clearly, even after planting." One day, an opportunity knocked on Viraj's door. A wandering trader offered to sell him a barren piece of land on the edge of the village. It was a place where nothing had ever grown. The trader promised, "With the right magic herbs, this soil can flourish. I am giving you the chance of a lifetime." Everyone in the village warned Viraj against the deal. His father gently advised, "Son, that land has defeated generations of farmers. It's not a wise decision. Think carefully." But Viraj saw only what he wanted. If he made that land bloom, his name would be spoken with awe. Without hesitation, he emptied his savings and bought the land. When his father gave him a concerned look, Viraj said with pride, "The regret of missed chances is worse than the regret of failed actions." Days passed, and Viraj worked relentlessly. He tilled the barren soil under the sun, and he poured every herb and fertilizer he could find into the ground. Nothing grew. The more the earth resisted, the harder Viraj tried, as if his stubbornness alone could sprout plants. The villagers looked on with pity, but Viraj only scowled. "I have made my decision, and I will not regret it," he muttered each time the silence of failure gnawed at him. Months rolled by, and all Viraj had to show for his effort was exhaustion. Yet, he refused to acknowledge his mistake. "A real man does not regret his decisions," he told himself, ignoring the growing debts and dwindling food at home. His father sat him down one evening and said, "Son, a regretful decision teaches you wisdom, but pretending not to regret can only lead to ruin." Viraj did not listen. The more barren the land became, the more rigid he grew, like a man clinging to a sinking ship because he refused to believe it was sinking at all. One day, a terrible drought swept through the region. Fields that once thrived with crops now lay parched and water became scarce. Farmers scrambled to save what little they had, but Viraj's barren land gave him no shelter from the disaster. He had spent everything trying to make it bloom, leaving nothing for emergencies. As the drought deepened, Viraj found himself in desperate need of help. His debts piled up, and the villagers shook their heads in dismay. If only he had seen reason, they whispered. Yet, even then, Viraj would not admit defeat. "I regret nothing," he said stubbornly. "I made my choice, and I will stand by it." His father's words echoed in his mind, but Viraj ignored them. He thought about Duryodhana from the ancient tales, the prince who clung to his pride until the end, never regretting his treachery, even as it cost him everything. If Duryodhana did not regret, why should I? He asked himself. But the question that haunted him in the quiet nights was, what did Duryodhana's pride leave him in the end? The drought lasted long, and by the time the rains returned, Viraj had lost his land to creditors. His father's small savings were gone, spent in a desperate attempt to rescue him. Viraj stood on the outskirts of the village one evening, staring at the barren field that had consumed everything he had. He knew the land would never bloom, not because it was cursed, but because he had sown his choices in arrogance, not wisdom. For the first time, a crack appeared in Viraj's pride. The heavy weight of regret that he had resisted for so long finally descended upon him. He whispered to himself, "Just because I told myself I would not regret it doesn't mean the decision wasn't regrettable." And then, something remarkable happened. As Viraj let regret wash over him, clarity began to take root. He saw every mistake he had made, rushing the decision, ignoring the warnings, pouring energy into a stubborn dream. But along with the regret came a lesson. Mistakes could shape him if he let them. He returned home to his father that night and for the first time admitted, "I made a mistake." His father smiled gently. "You've taken the first step, son. Regret isn't a burden, it's a compass showing you what not to do next." From that day, Viraj began to rebuild his life, but this time with a new kind of strength, the strength to reflect, to learn, and to change course when needed. He worked on the family farm, applying the lessons he had learned from his failure. Seasons passed, and though the journey was long, Viraj slowly regained what he had lost. Years later, when a young boy in the village asked Viraj, "How do I make sure I never make mistakes?" he smiled and said, "You can't avoid mistakes, but you can choose to learn from them. The real mistake is pretending you don't regret them." And so, Viraj became known not for the fields he tried to cultivate, but for the wisdom he cultivated within himself. His story spread across the village, a reminder to all that while some decisions may be regrettable, it is only through embracing regret that we grow into who we are meant to become. My dear friends, our life is filled with decisions, some small, some big, some good, some bad, some recognized as bad, and some not recognized as bad. During the course of our life, and especially the course of our growth through life, we need to be able to look at our decisions objectively so that we can learn from them consistently. That means each one of us needs to be able to have a certain level of dispassion or non-attachment when we look at the choices that we made, the considerations that went into making those choices, and the consequences that played out after those choices. The Bhagavad Gita 18:30 declares that intelligence in the mode of goodness contemplates the various relevant factors involved in choosing a judicious course of action. As contrasted with such decision-making in the mode of goodness, the same Gita, 2 verses later in 1832, cautions that some people misjudge what is desirable, what is healthy, what is passionate, and indeed their conclusions are the opposite of what they should be. They conclude bad decisions as good ones, and vice versa. Such a mismatch in assessment and reality can occur when a decision is regrettable in the sense that not only does it have objectively terrible consequences, but it is also proclaimed to be terrible by objective observers. Yet the person making that decision remains rigid in rationalizing it, defying their own reasoning process. Thus, a decision itself may be regrettable, but it is not regretted by them. This is the path to self-created deception that spirals into self-propelled destruction. This indeed is the trajectory Duryodhana takes in the Mahabharata. He never regrets many of his cunning machinations against the Pandavas, which finally result in a devastating fratricidal war that costs not only his life, but also the lives of all his 100 brothers, and indeed a major section of the Kuru dynasty into which he was born. I hope you learn. Jai Shri Krishna.